All right, good morning, everybody. This is Will from Michigan, back again. We're going to do something a little bit different today. So, I belong to many groups on Facebook for tarot card readings and people seeking readings. Their groups are often free, and there's hundreds of them, and they're a great resource for people looking to either learn tarot or receive some insight into their life as well. There's lots of scams on these sites, but there's some valuable information there as well. So, with all the valuable information, there's also a lot of misinformation and confusion. And I get many messages. I offer a lot of readings, and I get many messages, and people have a lot of questions surrounding what actually is tarot and how these cards work. And there's no definite right answer, but I just want to bring a little bit of clarity to the community here regarding what the cards are and what to look for and what to expect. The first thing that I want to show you guys is what tarot cards actually are. Oh, we'll put this down there and we'll give an explanation when I get to this. These are tarot cards. This is the standard Rider-Waite deck. When somebody offers a tarot reading, they're probably using cards similar to this or cards that follow a similar system. This is the original, well, it's the soft palette, different color scheme version of the original, not the original, but the tarot deck that people most commonly use. Tarot has a very rich history, but tarot as we know it in the 21st century is defined by the Rider-Waite Smith deck, which has been around since, I believe, the early 20th century, maybe the late 1800s. However, there are other types of decks of divination, and well, it's not necessarily just divination either. This is a complicated subject, but we'll just use the term divination. There's different types of divinatory decks as well, and they're known as oracle cards. So oracle cards don't necessarily follow the system that tarot cards do, and they're meant to be interpreted more so at face value, or they each have their own set of rules with how the cards are played. And this is an example of the oracle cards that I typically use right here. This is the Oracle of the Radiant Sun. They got a picture and they have a word. And I take these cards at face value, although the deck, like most decks do, came with a book and a special way that you're supposed to lay the cards. I haven't learned that yet for this deck in particular. I just use them as a supplement to the readings that I do with the Rider-Waite Smith deck. And I think that's how a lot of readers use them as well. It's not a common deck that I've seen, though, for oracle decks. I think most of the oracle decks that you'll see when people offer one-card readings in these groups are decks more similar to this. This is the Soul's Journey lesson cards. And what they do is they have a pretty picture, a word, and a motivational statement. It's kind of like a fortune cookie. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. They're like a fortune cookie reading. They're useful, but they're not the only way to. They're just one way of many to kind of play cards like this. Now, I don't like to look at tarot as some sort of dark art or some type of magic trick. This is a system. I don't want to say it's a science, but it's a system. And it's almost like a self-help model. And my ultimate goal with these videos is to enlighten people so they're able to help themselves with these cards, and they're able to find meaning in the cards just like I have and many other people have. And I kind of want to decode it and demystify it and make it more practical so it's not as scary and mystic and intimidating for someone who is new to the practice to learn. So what we're going to go over today is I have the first 6 cards laid down here in the Major Arcana. Now, the Major Arcana are the first cards in the Rider-Waite Smith deck, and they don't have a suit. They're not the pip cards. They're just face cards, and they're representative of some type of human archetype or an event that a human can, like a human experience, a general human experience. And there are many ways to read them. This is just my way of reading them. I took notes, but I don't think I'm going to use my notebook, and I'm just going to tell you guys what I know off the top of my head. And that's what I advise you guys to do as well. Don't get too caught up on the literal definitions. Each deck of tarot cards comes with a book, and it gives you little bits of information, but there's so much deeper than that. And I think the best readings are read with some knowledge of how the cards work, but also read intuitively. And a good tarot reading is just as much reading the client as it is the cards. And that's not necessarily telling them what they want to hear, but it's about reading their situation and making the cards kind of fit in and blend into their situation so they can relate to it. So we'll get started. We'll look at these cards here. The first card in the deck, card 0, is the Fool. And the Fool is an uninitiated and unenlightened person, and he's representative of blissful ignorance. He's representative of youth, someone who is about to start an adventure, someone who's about to go forth into the world and really doesn't have any idea what's going to hit him. If you look at the imagery on the card, it's a man walking without a care in the world, a man or a boy, a child, and he's walking right up to the edge of a cliff. He's got no idea that cliff's coming, and he doesn't seem to care. He's got a little dog yipping after him. He's happy. This is a card of happiness. This is a card of bliss. This is a card of good fortune, because we've got a grand adventure after us. We don't know what's coming next, and we're okay with that. It's a card of peace. And I think that that card is representative of most people in mainstream society. I'm not talking about the people on the fringes that have studied this type of system. I'm talking about like your everyday Joe walking to Starbucks to get a coffee and then off to work and doesn't really care. He's just living his life and doing him, and he's happy with that. And that's okay. It's okay to play the fool sometimes. The next card, card number 1, is the Magician. Now, the Magician is someone who has recently been enlightened, and he's beginning his journey towards spiritual initiation, and he's beginning to learn that he can kind of manifest and shape the world around him, and he's not just a victim to circumstance. If you look at the imagery on the card, and we'll get more into this symbolism later, but you can see he has a wand, a sword, a cup, and a pentacle on the table. And those are the suits of the minor arcana, which we're not going to get into today, but we will eventually. And he's able to kind of manipulate and shape those suits, which are also representative of elements, to fit his needs. I see the Magician as someone who is charismatic. He's able to influence a crowd. He's able to get people to like him. He's able to spark relationships and conversations with people. And he's in control of his surroundings, or he's beginning to take control. He's learning to take control of his surroundings. Now, all of these cards also have a slightly different meaning when they're reversed, but I'm not going to get into that right now either. I just want to take these cards at face value today. Card number 3 is the Empress, and I see her as the matriarch. I see her as a female leader. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be a female leader, but it's a nurturing figure. So it could be a male as well, if that male has a nurturing role. So, it could be a mother or a father. It could be a boss or a supervisor at work, or somebody that nurtures something that has some type of leadership role. I think a lot of people also look at this card as a card of fertility. I personally don't necessarily like to use tarot cards in that way to predict fertility. I really recommend that if you have questions about your health, you see a doctor. However, people do see this card as representing fertility or motherhood. The next card in the deck is the Emperor, which is kind of the masculine equivalent. So rather than the divine feminine that the Empress would represent, this is the divine masculine. He is a male leader figure who rules with more, rather than nurture, he rules with authority. He's not necessarily a disliked person, but he's a stern person. People can see the Emperor as somewhat rigid and even a little antiquated in his approach to society, but he is a firm and authoritative leader. He's a well-respected figure, and he can also be representative of like kind of the older generation and how things used to be done, the good old days. So if the Empress and the Emperor are like leaders or authority figures, the next card, the High Priestess and the Hierophant, are representative of spiritual leaders. So the High Priestess is representative of like a, again, kind of divine feminine nature, but that doesn't necessarily just mean like feminine gender wise. It also means like feminine traits like the arts or creativity or things that you'd use the right side of your brain. I guess that would be the way to frame it. I don't even know if that's for real, but yeah, like a more creative nature. She represents kind of what's hidden within us, our shadow self. She is enlightened and she's secretive, and she doesn't necessarily give the information away as easy as some of the other cards. It's information that you've got to actively look for and seek her out and study her to attain. The next card in the deck is the Hierophant. And the Hierophant is kind of the male spirituality equivalent to the High Priestess. And he's more forward in his approach. People follow him and people look to him and he'll give you the information. So it's not necessarily, like I would see the High Priestess as esoteric and I would see the Hierophant as exoteric. So the High Priestess is information that you would have to search and be part of some, maybe not like a coven or a secret society, but it's information that you'd have to search for. And the Hierophant would be information, representative of information that you can find at church or in the Bible. And it's not necessarily false or information that isn't useful, but it's information that's more readily available and more straightforward and to the point and doesn't need to be decoded as the High Priestess would. The Hierophant can also be seen as like a leader that doesn't necessarily have to do with politics. So like a physician or a psychologist or somebody in a role that people follow to and look for some sort of information. So that is the first 6 cards of the major arcana, and there's so much more to these cards than what I've just expressed to you. That's really only the beginning and my interpretation, and I totally understand that some people aren't going to agree with my interpretation, and that's okay too, because there's many ways to interpret these cards. I'm just one reader of millions, and I hope this video is ultimately an education tool to those who have more questions and wish to learn and explore tarot. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comment section or follow me on Instagram. And you guys have a great week.